In this documentary, filmmaker Kevin Douglas Wright randomly selected people born between 1946 and 1953. He asked each of them 6 different questions. Watch as the answers to these questions tell a story about someone teaching something that has been responsible for destroying people, cities, states, and countries in front of our eyes for hundreds of years. Now, let's meet everyone.
My name is Maggie Elliot.
My name is Stephen.
Hi, my name is Gloria.
What's your earliest memory of someone pointing out that there's a difference between being black and being white? Made you feel you're black, and that's a difference. Like your earliest memory.
My earliest memory was in first form in high school when we started to do history.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that I was looked upon as being privileged because I was probably a little lighter. And it bothered me because by then I had had friends who were very dark and arranged, and I couldn't understand why society had to do something like that.
Right.
You know.
And one of the things that happened to me that is burned in my mind. I was in the 9th grade, and my teacher, who was white, at a predominantly all-black junior high school, that up until the time I left Omaha, black folks weren't allowed into. It was an amusement park, not located far from downtown.
When my father would take us about 55, we got a car, and we wanted to go to Georgia to see his mother and other relatives. And I could never understand why we had to stop. I have no doubt that some of those jobs that I applied for were given to other people because they were strictly white Americans.
Mm-hmm.
They had no greater qualifications. I came back, I already had a master's degree. I already had, work experience under my belt and the whole 9 yards. And you look up and somebody else got the job.
You have racism even in our own race. That is something that is the most stupid notion that I've come across. If you're a little light skinned and you're a little dark skinned, it goes both ways. There can be animosity because of it. Stupid. Stupid.
Let me tell you one positive, one negative. The negative first. The governor of Alabama, George Wallace, was running for president. Came to Omaha, Nebraska, campaign and had a rally at the convention center, and a bunch of us went down to protest. And I was up in the aisles, and I remember a bunch of folks, also young black folks and Hispanic, were down on the main floor.
And about how
protesting.
About how
I must have been 16, 17. And a riot started. And this this old white guy walked by me and said, "Nigga, you ain't even supposed to be in here." And remember it distinctly.
And did you heard it? What did you feel at that moment, or it just?
It after you've been called it so many times, you get situational about it. Your perspective expands or grows or develops. And like I said, I could either kick his ass, just let him go about doing what he was going to do. And I was more concerned, me and my buddy, about observing and having a sense of recording this in our minds of what was happening. And when the rioting started, I walked over, stood close to him, and he put his hands up and said, "Please don't hit me, please don't hit me." And to me, that was kind of a victory.
Right.
To this day, what I do regret is all the folks who've come here and basically from wherever don't know what we went through during Jim Crow, and they want to look at us as second-class citizens, one way or the other.
Now, a good story. When Bobby Kennedy, I guess this was 68.
You were
around the same time. Yeah, 68.
Was running around the same age.
Yeah, was running. He came to Omaha on his way to his death in Los Angeles, and he stopped, and we couldn't find my sister and some of her friends, and finally we located them. They were up in his room talking politics to Bobby Kennedy. Wow. And I can't imagine how valuable the experience was for her. And she took his assassination or death very, very hard, because she had just had this experience of sitting and talking to him and communicating with him and getting to know him on a personal level. But that was one of those times that you live that something unique and special happens to you,
right?
Stays with you for the rest of your life.
And I never will forget, she said, "I felt so bad. My nephew and his wife, who can pass for white, went to Miami and came back and said," because I sponsored them to come here, "Auntie, would you be upset if we moved to Miami because Black people in this country have a hard time?" So that meant that they could pass. And if you know anything about people who pass, and the reason why, and you want to try to figure out how we get all these shades and everything right now, you go and read some of the books and they'll tell you the lighter ones among us, if we could do that, because the things are so bad during Jim Crow in the South or whatever, because you have to understand that you're still coming off of slavery here, where the massa has raped and because I doubt if a lot of those things were consensual, where the massa has raped somebody and they have these light-skinned children. If they were light enough to pass, if you go back and read up on it, it'll tell you that they went north, they severed all ties, and they prayed that if they had children, they wouldn't come out looking dark as you and like me or you, because they had to be able to pass. And
I had one run-in with the police when I was younger. I was a driver. I had my mother owned a station wagon. I was driving me and my boys around, and we were goofing around, and the police pulled us over. And
did you have any at that time? Did you have any fear when?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So as soon as they.
Oh no. Yeah, I had genuine fear.
And even the other passengers in the car also, they were
aware. I had fear for myself. I had fear for them. I had fear that they were going to do some stupid stuff that would get me killed.
I used to have friends of mine who were lighter complexion, and it was like we'd be outside playing, and "Oh, girl, come in the house because you're going to get dark," And my mother would always tell us about coffee. "Oh, don't ever drink coffee because you're going to get darker," And I said, I have a cup of coffee every morning. She also didn't let me wear colors. That's why I like pink and or green. I didn't like red, never liked red. But she'd always made sure that I had on navy blue or black or whatever. I'm a color kid.
And I remember saying a prayer to myself as the police officer got out of his car and walked up to my window. Lord, get me out of this, and this would never happen again.
And you could tell immediately that it was a white police
Oh,
officer.
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. And he walked up, asked what we were up to. He said something about somebody had complained about some young people yelling out the windows of a car at them. I said, officer, I don't know about that. But I caught some good luck, and he says, "Okay, well, where are you headed?" "I'm just taking my guys home, then I'm going home." I said, "Okay, well, let's see that you do that." I dropped those brothers off. I don't even know if I ever let them in my car again. But we weren't doing it. I mean, making noise, being loud, and all that stuff. But
You knew. Yeah. Okay. Just like my father, from what I'm told, he and his brother walked to Florida. Transportation or whatever the case may be. Sleeping in the woods and stuff like that to get down in here.
Wow.
Because
and walking from where?
Georgia.
And walked all the way.
Yeah. And so you get here, you know that on your journey you can't be out in the public at night or whatever. You got to try to sleep somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know anybody along the way that they could seek safe harbor. But if by chance you met somebody, and people back then were a lot more welcoming and just had a feel for. It was like everybody was family. Okay.
I made it home, and from then on, I walked straight and narrow. Lord have mercy. It's funny now.
Yeah, but it wasn't funny then.
It wasn't funny then.
And so, when you're on a journey like that, if you can imagine what they went through on the Underground Railroad or whatever, you meet well-meaning people one way or the other. Somebody might slip you a soda here or a meal or something like that, and you go on your merry way. Okay, lots of times, people doing those journeys didn't make it where they were going because they got caught up with some white person or whatever, and it was all about, and still is today, about their sense of entitlement. All this stuff that's going on now is about somebody's sense of entitlement. You aren't entitled to anything other than the breath that you breathe that God gives you. Okay, and it does not say to me that you ought to be going around treating people any kind of way or just like that they don't matter on this earth, because we certainly do.
How do you see the future? Do you see it getting better? Do you see that something still needs to be done?
Something that even in today's society, it is ongoing, but there is a feeling to me that our race is in danger, and unless we do something to protect it, it's going to get worse.
The one thing I would say that we've got to help us. I wish that I could somehow express to Black children how powerful they are and how they are just the opposite of the stereotype.
My grandfather was a stickler for education. He made no bones about it. You know, you got that education if you didn't get anything else. And his favorite saying, like they always say, once you get it up here in your head, nobody can take it away from you. And so that's a little bit about what we did and how we did it back then and there, with them setting the stage for us and letting us know that, hey, I want more for you than I had, or than your mother had, you know, and each generation has built on that, right, one way or the other.
We have been heard from so many angles. And this is one human being against another human being. It shouldn't be so. There should be laws protecting whether you're pink, white, purple, black, blue. That something like this should never happen. What happened in the past, we have no control of that. That's gone. But we should learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
And when I think about surviving the Middle Passage, surviving slavery, surviving Jim Crow, which was just another form of slavery, for the school, the 1954 school board decision, and to see that within less than 75 years, people that were thought of, ruled by Supreme Court as 3/5 of a man, Dred Scott, or less than human, could go from the kind of degradation we were subject to the most powerful man on the planet, that we, to have survived that with our dignity, with our passion, with our empathy, with our compassion still intact, there's nothing we can't do.
I came back from Howard University. I got a job down in Miami at Florida International University, and my job, after, because you're still in that range where you're just having had schools discriminated against, so my job was to actually run a program wherein we had parents and students together, tried to get them together to understand the cultures of each other, because what we found during that time, and it still is true today, is that once you're ignorant about somebody else's life or the situation that they're in or whatever, that's when you have the most prejudice. When you understand about another person's life or their culture or whatever the case may be, then you're more likely to be not a racist, basically. Right. Okay, so what we would do, we would go take these mixed families to restaurants together. We would have them to go into each other's homes, and we got a grant from the government to do that, you know. And
look at what happened in Germany under Hitler. They were intelligent, educated people who saw what was going on, but I don't know, they got caught up in this thing, and before you know it, Jews were being, oh my gosh, what they went, not only Jews, blacks also, were being wiped out. Look at the horrors that they experienced. One day, the same thing can happen again if we are not proactive. It can happen again. Let us learn from history.
There's nothing we cannot accomplish if we put our minds to it. We know the rules, and everybody adheres to the same set of rules. There's nothing we can't accomplish. I would love to see more of our kids hear that message, absorb that message, and believe it.
So I'm in Fort Lauderdale one day because I got this program going in Miami, and I want Broward to do the same. Okay, I want Broward citizens to get to know each other so that we could do away with some of the racism and the name calling and all of that stuff, okay? I'm in Fort Lauderdale one day, and I always carried my resumes then for whatever reason. Wow. And I ran into the director of the Urban League. And he said to me, or he asked me, he said, what are you doing nowadays? I said, oh, I'm still down in Miami or whatever. He says, look, they have a job over for a director of human rights in Broward County, and you need to be that next director. Where's your resume? So I gave him my resume. And lo and behold, I got a call. And I said, yes. I said, I agree. I'll panel for the job one way or the other. I said, I already have a job, but, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, look, there's more money.
Right.
And look at all the good you could do one way or the other. And so I went in and I paneled for the job, and obviously I did very well on it. But here was the clincher. There was an older Jewish lady, Kate, never will forget. And the department head at that time, they lured her away from Michigan, and she was a black female. Mm-hmm. And Kay paneled for the job or whatever, and I got to meet her. And lo and behold, I get this call. I said, Gloria, we'd like to make you a job offer. And I said, what? Because here's this older Jewish lady or whatever the case may be, right? So I took the job, and this lady was the assistant director. And what she did for me, I would never forget. She and I became very good friends, I'd known white people before, and stuff like that, but Kay and I became very good friends. And her husband, and they passed, they later went back to Monroeville, Pennsylvania, where they came from. And she and I were having lunch one day, and she said, Gloria, she said, I am so glad that you're here. She said, they wanted me to take this job. And after meeting you and seeing your credentials, I said to them, this is not a job for me. You have a very competent, young, black female who can do this job. And you need to offer her this position. I will never forget that. Mm-hmm. And until she retired, she worked as my assistant director. And we just had to, between what she brought to the table and what I brought to the table, we just had a great time filing charges against people for discriminating against African Americans in housing and employment, and we just had a great time. I hated to lose her as an assistant, but I understand.
The color of a man's skin should not dictate how he's treated. The contents of his character is what should be taken into consideration. And once again, I want to emphasize, not all whites are racists.
But each of us survived. Each of us contributed to the stew we call America. And at some point, America is going to decide to live up to its ideals, and it will be the better country for doing it. But as Churchill said, America will always do the right thing after it tries everything else. So racism still exists post Obama. I still worry when I walk out of my house and go out on the streets, because I live down here in Florida, and down here they have stand your ground law. And it would not surprise me, given my size, that somebody could just as easily shoot me and then say, look at him, I thought he was attacking me. And so we have to be careful. We have to think, and we have to impart that to our kids. At the same time, support them and empower them and have them understand how miraculous and divine they really are.
Okay? But with God's sense of humor, and I always look at it like this, and I tell a lot of people, with God's sense of humor, He has a way of making us get together regardless of whether or not we want it. That's why you see so many interracial marriages or whatever the case may be. All this stuff is going to come back full circle. You know, I put you all here, gave you breath, okay? Took care of all your needs and all this stuff, and you all are fighting about the color of your skin or whatever. So you don't want to do it. You want, let me do it.
But I do think America is the great hope of the planet. I think there's nothing we can't do. We set our minds to it. And I do think nowadays, with young people having friends who are black, having friends who are Hispanic or Asian or lesbian or gay, or physically or mentally challenged, and still be able to say, yeah, that's my buddy. That's who I run with. It's just some of us old farts have to die off to allow this new seedlings to take hold and grow, and we can continue to move forward. That's my truth, and I'm sticking to it.
For me, it's just, when you say, I'm optimistic. Because I know that, you know, there's a controlling power. And if we can't get it together, I think he's starting to do it. So you're going to have all these interracial kids. They know their black side, they know their white side. Okay? And that's how it's all going to come together. I don't know when, but that's my prediction.
I think you might have a point.
I'd like to think America has been the greatest experiment that this planet has ever seen. And right now we're going through a period where we're being tested. And whether we can stand up, retain our values, retain our sense of self, and do the right thing for the right reason. And we'll see how this turns out.